Okay, it looks like we are officially live. Hello, everybody. Joshua Hatton here with ImpEx Beverages, and I'm really excited about this series. Hopefully, some of you that are watching now have seen our other ImpEx Beverages events, which we were calling the Distillery Deep Dives. And with this one, we decided to change the name a little bit. We're now calling this ImpEx Beverages Drinks With. And Sam Filmus, our managing director and president of ImpEx, challenged me and challenged himself as well to bring on some really important guests for us to all have drinks with. So I'm going to be introducing them all shortly. This first one, just so you're aware, is one of three events we're going to be hosting. The first tonight is our focus on Scotch whiskey through the lens of brands within the ImpEx portfolio. Our second event, which is a week from today, that's December 8th, and that will be a focus on world whiskey producers. And it'll be, of course, held at the same time. And then finally, our third event will be a focus on independent bottlers. So I want to just quickly thank you all again for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoy the conversation tonight. Hopefully you enjoy a whiskey or two tonight. I've got some Kilchoman and Ardnamurchan and GlenAllachie and something else. So another little treat to the side for me here. So hopefully you've got a good drink in your glass and a good couple bottles to the side of you to enjoy as we have the conversation. So I'm going to introduce my first two guests. I should really call them co-hosts. This is Sam Filmus, managing director and president of ImpEx Beverages, and then Chris Udy, the VP of ImpEx. How are you, gents?
Very well, thank you, Joshua. Looking forward to an exciting night with some iconic people in the industry.
Yeah, same. And Chris, you good?
Yeah, I'm becoming astutely aware of my lack of shelving behind my shoulders, which seems to interrupt the modus operandi of that company. So
look at that. Do you have shelf envy right now?
Yeah. I do have a bit of shelf envy, but that's okay. I'm going to rob y'all later on.
Joshua will send you some wallpaper that he's using, so you can put it on your wall as well.
Perfect. I'd like to introduce first Mr. Anthony Wills of Kilchoman, the managing director of the Distillery. How are you, sir?
Very well indeed. Good to see you all.
You wide awake, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed?
Yeah, I took the decision to have a few hours sleep before I came on the live stream. I thought I'd be a bit more awake. That's proved the case, actually. And with a nice glass of Kilchoman Lochlea, and I've even brought myself a cup of tea just to keep me straight. But it's great to be able to join you this evening.
Great, it's really great to have you. Good to see your face as always. Next, I'd like to introduce Billy Walker, the master distiller and owner of the GlenAllachie Distillery. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Hi, everybody.
Do you have a cup of tea in hand or just the whiskey?
Actually, I'm being much more conservative tonight because I'm driving very early in the morning, so I'm actually not drinking at the moment.
Okay, I'm going to watch you. We'll see how long that lasts. Hopefully it lasts long. I want you to drive safely.
Considering all the great releases you've done, I reckon you get a pass, right?
Thank you. I'm very grateful.
Next, Mr. Alex Bruce of Ardnamurchan Distillery and Adelphi Selections. How are you, Alex?
Good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon even, I think. Yeah, very well. Thank you. I also had a power nap, but I think mine was only about half an hour before the alarm woke me up. But we were up quite late, or quite early this morning, actually, or yesterday morning. There was a big industry event in Glasgow last night, which we managed to crawl into our beds quite late, shall we say.
I saw the party pictures. That looked like quite an event.
I think any excuse for a party at the moment is a very good excuse, and everyone was making sure they had that excuse last night.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining after that long celebratory night.
No, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
And then we've got Mr. David Ferguson of the Lochlea Distillery. How are you, David?
I'm good, thanks. Joshua, how are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm hanging out with some really wonderful people I've known for a good long while, people I've admired for a good long while, and getting to meet and talk with you for the first time is a treat. I'm really happy to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be the most experienced guy on the call as well, with all these fellow industry people. So yeah, thank you very much for having us on. I know we're new kids on the block, so this is nice.
Had to wet the palate before I ask you a question. So I sent you all a question to get the conversation going, and as we've told the viewers, as we started promoting this event, we've invited people to send in their questions. And so I've prepared questions. We've had questions come in, and Sam took it quite literally too. He's prepared some questions in advance as well. So I've got those locked and loaded for him too. So this should be a good conversation here. So question number one for you all. Seeing as the focus here is Scotch whiskey, the category has been growing by leaps and bounds, despite Brexit, despite pandemics, despite global logistic nightmares that we're all experiencing, and everybody knows about this. You can just pick up a newspaper. It's not just affecting the whiskey industry, but it's affecting trade all around. Global logistics are a nightmare. And on top of that, there was a 25% tariff on Scotch whiskey coming into the US. Despite all these things, the category grew, whether it was in the US or outside of the US, within Europe, and etc. And so with that in mind, I've got questions specifically for each one of you. And if you don't mind, Billy, I'd like to start with you. Okay. With the building of the GlenAllachie brand now, how does that differ from your revival of GlenDronach back in the day? Can you compare the two? Was it more difficult to revive GlenDronach back in the earlier 2000s, or was it easier because it already had a brand, an established brand? Or do you think GlenAllachie is a bit easier to grow because, well, the industry is growing and the awareness is growing, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it's a very difficult question to answer because we're actually living in a different world in 2021 than we were in 2008. And actually, it isn't necessarily true that GlenDronach was a brand, because when we acquired the business, there were no sales. Although the distillery itself carried with it a substantial reputation, and in 2004, 2008 period, or the 2008 when we acquired GlenDronach, single malt was becoming sexy, but it didn't have the drive or the momentum that it has enjoyed in the last 5 or 10 years, and is in a significantly strong role at the moment. So when we acquired GlenAllachie, we were comfortable in terms of the journey we were setting out on. And one of the big pluses with GlenAllachie also was that it had never really been exposed to the market in any significant way, or indeed some would say in any way at all. So we had a blank canvas. So we could create the personality of GlenAllachie going forward as we saw what we wanted to create. It also helped significantly that we acquired a terrific amount of inventory, very good inventory, vintage stuff all the way through to young stuff. So we were in a strong position. The market was also in a strong position. We were familiar with the routes to market that would determine whether we could be successful or not. We focused entirely on private independent importers, focusing on private independent retailers, and in markets we knew that could influence consumers. And that's not easy nowadays, because there is a very, very informed consumer out there, a very challenging consumer who probably knows more than I do now about single malt. But so the journey was interesting. And have we been disappointed? No, we haven't. The market has been very, very helpful. The energy, particularly in Asia, is fantastic. And the problems that we've encountered with COVID are all of what you have kind of outlined. But even when we were lucky enough to get access to materials, everything we produced would sell out very quickly. And that has, although it's nice to know, it creates problems along the way. So, look, we're on the train, we've bought a ticket. It's probably a little bit faster than we thought it would be, but it's not an express train yet.
And there's obviously room to grow for you as well, having purchased a distillery that once had 4 million liters spirit capacity. You're now at around 600,000 liters of spirit, somewhere around there. So if you needed to grow, you could grow to meet that increasing demand if you so wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, the capacity is there to do it. I don't think that the market that we interface with would ever require 4 million litres of alcohol production from GlenAllachie. So we're comfortable. I think we're walking in the right shoes at the moment. And 600, 700,000 litres is a good place to be. It means that we can focus on things like long fermentation. We only operate a one shift system 5 days a week. And that has allowed us the freedom to do things like very long fermentations, on average 160 hours, but in some cases it's 2 to 3 days, maybe 4 days. So we don't have any ambitions to increase the production beyond where we are at the moment.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn the question over to Anthony, and it's slightly different. You know, you're at about 2 years having expanded the distillery. You've doubled your overall capacity. And I remember a comment you made early on, 2004, 2005, where you thought, you know, if we do 60,000 liters of spirit per year, that's good. That's the target. Well, you grew to 250,000 liters per year. Now you're at 500, a bit over 500,000 liters of spirit per year. Do you think if you'd approached building a distillery in 2015, your thought process would be different compared to what it was in 2005? Would you have built differently?
I know, I definitely think so. I think it's interesting listening to Billy and what he had to say about GlenDronach and GlenAllachie. I think, if to actually buy a distillery that had stock and that you could work your magic on that stock and put it onto the market after, maybe 6 months or a year or even earlier, then you're a very good place. But actually building a new distillery, as Alex will attest to, is bloody hard work and very risky because you are basically putting your faith in the spirit that you're going to, the quality of the spirit you're producing, and that there's a market out there. And back in 2001, 2002, when I came up with this idea, that there wasn't a buzz at that point for single malt. There certainly was the chatter, and certainly independent bottlers were doing a great job in promoting and marketing and selling sort of special single cask strength. And I came from that background, and I saw the interest. But you're taking a massive risk in building a new distillery because you're really not sure what's going to happen and whether the general public, the consumers, are going to be up for trying out a new whiskey. But I think timing in this world is everything. I think when we built Kilchoman and launched Kilchoman for the first time in 2009, the market was beginning to accept new brands and, more importantly, non-aged single malts. And So would I have done things differently? You know, when we first started, we only produced, as you say, we only produced 60,000 litres in our first full year of production. And every year since then, we've produced a bit more. And, you know, I think I'm happy that we did it that way. If I was starting a new distillery now, yes, I'd probably start at 500,000 litres, because I have that confidence that the market is moving in that direction. And, you know, you look now and see how many new distilleries have started since 2005 in Scotland. I'm talking about, you know, you can see the enthusiasm, the drive, and the market is there, and single malt is on fire. And certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, you know, it's been a great time to be involved in the industry. And I think we have the greatest confidence now that we, in a very small way, we've created a brand of Islay single malt, a new brand of Islay single malt, that, you know, to actually invest in producing more was the right thing for us to do. So, you know, when you say we're now in a position that we can produce between 600 and 650,000 litres of alcohol a year. Wow. And I loved Billy's chat there about they're only doing one shift 5 days a week. Oh, God, you're absolute bliss. I mean, we're now 7 days a week, 24 hours round the clock, just to produce what we think we need going forward. And Billy would be the first to tell you that, you know, this industry is crazy when it comes to forecasting what you require and the direction you're going and how much liquid you need. But we have the confidence, so we've invested heavily, and we hope, you know, I sit here and say that we're not looking to expand any further than that. But who knows? I've got my 3 sons working in the business now, and they're very driven to take it forward. And certainly I'm happy. 600,000 litres, you know, at the moment, we need to be producing that. We're fortunate the brand is growing, and the USA is a strong market for us. And we don't want to sit back and be in a position where we're allocating stock. So it's important for us to keep driving forward. But I'm getting no younger. But luckily, my sons can take over from the old man when they think he's ready to put out of grass.
It's always nice to hear your sons refer to you as the old man on the road. They're waiting.
Yeah, they certainly do. And actually, James was very amused that I was having to do this evening. Not that having to do it. It's a great pleasure to be joining you at 1:30 in the morning. But he's been the one. He did remind me that he's done a number of these over the last year and a half. So he thought it was about time I did one.
I'm going to pause this here really quickly. Sam, you had submitted a question for this that I think is a perfect segue, or this discussion now is a perfect segue into your question. Do you mind if I pose it to Anthony just now?
Absolutely, but before we do that, I got a comment. I've heard this story about your age reference about 10 years ago. Now hear the same story. Is that not changing? So you're going to be young forever, Anthony? What's the deal there?
What, me personally, or the distillery?
You personally. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm back on Islay. I'm looking after the stock, looking after cask maturation, and putting the vattings together for our releases. I'm having a great time. Back in the early years, I was traveling non-stop. I was away from the distillery for 6 months of the year. And as you get older, you tend to not enjoy the traveling quite as much. And so the boys are doing that when we can, they're out on the road. But no, look, I'm having a fun time over here on Islay, and I'm not going anywhere, but I might just slow down a bit. But at the moment, it doesn't seem that we're doing that. I mean, the single malt market is in a great place at the moment. And we see that the growth is there. There's no doubt about that, not only in the maturing markets, but in new markets that it's great to see the big companies open up for us smaller companies to come in and showcase our wonderful whiskey.
Beautiful.
Great.
So the question that Sam had sent in, and it was so striking what you said, Anthony, about your sons talking about you, because Sam brings up a good point. Anytime we have James in the States, if we do an event with him, your name is always on his lips. He's always bringing up Anthony. So your name is always synonymous with Kilchoman, whether or not you're there or not. Your sons have your name on their lips. Could you just quickly share with us the motivation to pack up everything you had, cash in all you had, and follow this dream of building a distillery on Islay during a time when whiskey wasn't really having the boom, like you said? There was peeps, but it wasn't as it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably I was the brave or the stupid one in the industry to actually do it. I think there were plenty of people in the industry that were thinking about it and had thought about it for some time. I think I just took that risk straight away and just got on with it. I didn't look at it in terms of how an accountant would look at it. Otherwise, I would have been off in a funny farm, I think, because that's what most people felt when I came up and talked to people about building a new distillery. And especially here on Islay, look, it's a small island with only 3,000 people. There were already 8 working distilleries at the time I started Kilchoman. Look, I mean, I think that you go through trials and tribulations. Alex will attest to that. I mean, look, starting a new distillery is not straightforward. Billy got it right because he went out and bought an existing distillery and had the reputation and the know-how to take a distillery like GlenAllachie and Benriach and now GlenAllachie and make it into a single malt brand that has been hugely successful around the world. So building a new distillery, chucking loads and loads of money at it to start with for the first 5, could be longer, 8, 10 years, it's hugely risky, massively risky. But now I think there's more confidence in the industry, and new distilleries are obviously got the support and the backing and can raise funds relatively straightforwardly. Whereas back in my day, I couldn't raise the money for love nor money. I mean, I went to various events and presentations, but whiskey investment was not sexy back in 2000 to 2005. It wasn't something that people were looking at to invest their money. That in those days, it was all about the quick in and out, 3 to 5 years and get your money out and invest in something else. So when you told them that it was a sort of 15 to 20 year investment sort of time scale, it really turned people off. So basically, I just mortgaged myself to the hilt. I got a bit of private investment in, and then it was a very, very rocky road for 5 years or so. Simply because I hadn't raised enough money, never realized how much I needed, took the risk that I could find investors as I took this journey on. And then it was better to get them to the distillery and show them what I was actually creating than trying to do it in a presentation in a boardroom somewhere around the country. And fortunately for myself, we found those private investors who've been with us ever since we started in 2005 and have been very, very supportive, because they had to dig bloody deep because I kept on running out of money in those early years. And that's why it was so important to launch a single malt as soon as we could. Had the confidence that the consumer was ready for it. And I think it shows now, with all these new distilleries now coming on stream and launching their single malt, and these wonderful young single malts, Ardnamurchan and Lochlea are soon going to launch. They're wonderful drams at a relatively young age. Now, if you try to do that 20, 25 years ago, as Billy will tell you, people would have laughed in your face. You wouldn't have stood a chance. You'd have been sent packing straight away. But it was just fortunate that the market was changing its perception of single malt around the globe. And whiskey enthusiasts were popping up everywhere around the world, and whiskey specialist shops and clubs and bars. And so, when we come along with Kilchoman in 2009 at just over 3 years of age, people were ready to give it a chance. And I think that's what's changed in the single malt whiskey market. Driven by the big companies, there's no doubt that we wouldn't be sitting here in front of you if the big conglomerates hadn't done a wonderful, wonderful job in promoting whiskey and single malt around the world. And they just were eager to try other single malts and the tried and tested 10-year-olds that they had been trying. And I think the independent bottlers have played a massive part in promoting premium single malt. There is absolutely no doubt about that. the single car independent bottlers, we're talking about sort of mid 1990s that really sort of took off and started to promote independent bottling, single cask bottling at cask strength, and it's gone from there. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful journey that we're all on, and I'm sure we all have the same confidence sitting in this room tonight that this is going to go on for some time, and that we're in it and have started this journey, and there's great potential for all of us to really succeed in a very strong way.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's great. I really like what you had to say about independent bottlers, not for selfish reasons, but actually I think it's a good segue into my question to Alex Bruce. So, Ardnamurchan, I think, I'm trying to think, your spirit started running sometime around 2014, if I'm not mistaken. But the Adelphi selection started in the early 90s, 93, I want to say. Do I have my dates right?
I think yes. Officially it started end of 92, but I think by the time the initial selection process of whatever it would have been, 2 or 3 casks had got into bottling, it would have certainly been 1993 for Adelphi.
So with that time frame in mind, were there thoughts earlier on of opening a distillery, or did this idea of building and opening a distillery only crop up after seeing others starting to pave the way, like Aaron in the mid 90s, and then Kilchoman in the early 2000s, etc.? Were they an inspiration to you, or is this something that you wanted to do early on, and then you saw their success and decided maybe it's a good time for us?
I think, Anthony's covered it quite well in that, he really was, in terms of building a new distillery, one of the few in those days. I can only speak personally from 2004 onwards, because that's when I started with Adelphi. My predecessor had actually put a pretty decent offer in, a decent bid in for a certain well-known distillery on Islay in the 90s called Ardbeg, and had narrowly missed out to LVMH, very narrowly, in fact, I think. But yeah, look, so he sold the business in 2003. The new owners brought me on in 2004. And at that point, it was almost like we had a restart. We only had a few casks in stock, a few assorted bottles, and I built the stock as best I could. And I also got on a plane, a bit like Anthony, and started traveling. And within probably 2 to 3 years, it was fairly obvious that model for simply selecting mature stock to our taste and bottling it under the Adelphi brand was going to flatline at some point. Demand was strong, and supply, if anything, was dwindling, because a lot of the mature stocks that we were getting were now sought after by the original owners. So that was certainly a driving force. But I think the decision to build a distillery, or to buy one, or to grow the business that way, I think that was fundamentally based on not just the issue that we had with Adelphi, but also the fact that we had decent distribution through Adelphi. I think if we didn't have that distribution around the world, albeit quite small but wide, if you like, I think it would have been a harder question to answer in terms of building. We had a huge amount within the very small team. Everyone wanted to do it. There was a huge amount of passion. None of us had ever made whiskey before, so we obviously needed to bring in expertise to help us. But we all really, really wanted to make single malt, and that certainly was the thing that kind of kicked it more quickly, if you like, into production. There was probably a 2 to 3 year gap while I went around and quizzed the likes of Billy and Anthony and various other people in the industry about how mad the idea was. And actually, funny enough, the final trigger was actually a trip to Japan and seeing Chichibu in production. In fact, I think Anthony, I came up with you to Chichibu that day. We were both in Tokyo, and seeing how much quality they had, but how simple it was. That was something I took home to the rest of the board, and I said, look, we don't have to build this massive distillery on the hill. We can start off fairly simply, at a reasonable size. So that was the kind of course we took, if you like.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And it's amazing seeing your growth has been like I don't know how big hockey is in Scotland, but the Canadians who are watching this will know what I mean. Your growth has been like this. It's been like a hockey stick kind of growth, which has just been fantastic to see.
Well, that's very kind. I think, going back to that, what I've just said, we wouldn't have done it unless we knew we had a good chance. There was a certain amount of commercial decision in there, even though it was driven by passion for making whiskey. And, we waited. Like Anthony, we had to make sure that the wallet had a bit of money in it, and it quite often didn't. But we waited as long as we could to the point that we were confident the whiskey was decent. And not only that we had plenty of stock coming along behind it at that level. That consistency in the warehouses is so important before you kick off.
Yeah, I like that your initial approach to it was, do we have a distribution model in place, right? That is so key and something that your average consumer wouldn't think about. But these are the bare bones, that wireframe that you need to even consider doing something of this magnitude of opening a distillery. Do you have a way in which to distribute it to the markets that you want to get it into? Very important. Yeah.
Times are changing, though. I mean, being alcohol, you've got to certainly have foundations of distribution. Otherwise, you'll find it quite hard to get it overseas. But Billy touched on this earlier about the breadth of the consumer focus that we now have compared to 10, 15 years ago. At one end, we've got the guys who have far more experience than us who are actually making it. The consumer who knows everything and enjoys fantastic whiskey, which is superb. And at the other end, you've got new markets really starting to build, like China, mainland China, for example. So you not only have to cater for all of that, but you've got to remember that the digital the communications are something that most of us have only sort of been working with for like 2 or 3 years. All these social media channels. And, you can be in China, you can be in America, you can be all over the world at the touch of a button. And it's not just how you get your whiskey to them, it's how you actually talk to them as well, which is very exciting, I think, for the industry.
It sounds like you've just said COVID had a silver lining.
It was certainly a leveler. It allowed the small guys to do okay, I think.
Yeah. I want to turn to David Ferguson of Lochlea. You guys are without a doubt, you're the new kids on the block, right? A very new lowland distillery, and I find that striking, right? You've got Speyside, Highlands, Islay, Campbelltown, Lowlands, and of the two most underserved regions are Campbelltown and the Lowlands. You just don't see distilleries popping up in these areas. I think the last one, at least to my mind, for Lowlands opening up was Annandale, but there may be another one that I'm not thinking of. But with this idea of starting a distillery in the Lowlands, are you looking to champion that style? And what is that style? There may be some people that simply aren't familiar with the style of Lowlands. Or are you looking to maybe challenge that preconceived idea of what a Lowland style would be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I to be honest, Joshua, the fact that we're a lowland distillery is because the owner lives on a farm in the lowlands. There really wasn't. I mean, there's no kind of when you talk about reviving a region within Scotch, that certainly wasn't the plan for us. We just happened to be there. I mean, it's a funny. I'd be interested to hear what the rest of the guys think here tonight, because the Lowlands, to me, as a whiskey drinker for years, it's got a kind of strange reputation. So I mean, it's the biggest by production. It's the biggest region in Scotland. You know, it's all grain, but it is the biggest production region. So I think if you have in your mind light, delicate, grassy, herbal, these sort of, I think, a lot of connotations that go along with when people talk about lowland whiskey, none of which actually apply to us, which is why we don't really talk about it. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into Scottish history, but you could go back 300 years to why that style was associated with the lowlands, and most of it was going down south to make gin. So I think as a region, certainly we're very different to that typical style, or what I would class as a typical style. I could be wrong, and other people have a different idea of what lowland malt whiskey is. Our own new make, for example, it's juicy, really bursting with fruit. There's a lot of orange in there, pears, and then when you, depending on cask type, you've then got the bourbon turns that into sort of sweetness, baked apple, still some cereal note in the background, but there's also body to it. So I wouldn't compare us to a lowland, even in terms of mouthfeel and the actual substance of the whiskey, but never mind the flavour profile. So no, long way of answering you, but no, we're not trying to revive a certain region. We actually don't really talk about it much. I mean, we're on the west coast, so we're South Ayrshire, which is half an hour south of Glasgow, but in the countryside. So you're in quite a populous area of Scotland, but still rural in terms of the distillery site. So it's quite a nice balance, really. And if people want to compare us against other lowlands, then great. We'll happily sit alongside them. I think even with some of the other regions, I'm sure Alex wouldn't compare his spirit to Dalwhinnie. It's just inland in the same region technically, but that's it. Likewise, I'm not going to go through everything, but you know what I mean. There's so many different. I think people nowadays, or the other new distillers that I've spoken to recently, they've not even really considered the region they're in. They just happen to be in it, and they've gone ahead and tried to make something quite different. And we'll have our own DNA for Lochlea in terms of spirit. Other guys will have theirs, and whatever region they fall into, where the building went up, I don't think really has too much relevance anymore.
Yeah, that's
Joshua.
Joshua,
can I just say something about what David was saying?
Yeah.
David, I'm old enough to remember when much of these definitions were driven by the blenders within the blended Scotch whisky part of the industry. So a lot of the styles were dictated to by the owners of the blends, and indeed these were also the owners of the grain distilleries. And nowadays, the provenance and the region and the regionality really don't matter. It's about the personality that you want to create for your local distillery.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. Just a bit of a follow-up to you, David, and this one came in from Sam, actually. We understand your background is with Beam Suntory, and recently it's been announced that John Campbell has left Lefroy and he's joining the Lochlea Distillery, which is absolutely fantastic news. Was this a coincidence? Did it happen because of a previous connection you had to John through Beam?
I mean, since the owner's not on the call, I'll quite happily take full credit for it. Yeah. No. I mean, I know I've known John from my previous role. I was involved in the casks and bulk side of the business, so I was responsible for getting Lefroy the casks they wanted. So that was part of my job. So I was over there a few times. Took some American customers to see John and to get a tour of the place. So I knew him, but in terms of him joining Lochlea, that was just really good timing on all parts, and we were looking for someone in that mold of a kind of production, but actually doing a bit more around the brand side as well, and blending and everything. So at the same time when John was looking for a change himself in his career, so everything worked out quite nicely. I certainly didn't, and I wouldn't want anyone to think that I went back and poached one of their distillery managers at all, because I have a lot of friends back there. I don't, no, there's no bad blood at all. I work very closely with Ron Welsh, the master blender at Bean. Is one other sort of mentor of mine, and he did send me an email I think the night John announced it to the Bean family to say, "Oh, I see you've got your man ticked," and I thought, I knew he was joking, but no, it's great. It's great for us. So Lochlea as a brand, we're, like the guys have said, we're relatively young and new, and people don't really know about us yet. So having someone like that on board, I mean, biggest thing for me is that long term your spirit is going to be of the highest quality. And he's only been in, I think he's been with us for less than 10 days, and he's already got a bunch of really, really good ideas. So I will use him as much on the commercial side as he will allow me.
And now I just have to restrain myself from starting the David poached John rumor. I'll do my best not to put that out there. I'm going to switch gears here and direct a question to you, Billy, if you don't mind. You've got over 50 years in the industry. I think you've celebrated now 50 years as a blender, and recently, do I have that number right?
I think you have the number right, if I can just remember. Yeah.
And you Whisky Magazine put you into their Hall of Fame, which these are wonderful accomplishments, and they should be shouted to the rooftop. So congrats on both of those two achievements. You could have retired a while ago. You didn't have to go on and purchase the GlenAllachie distillery. And Sam, Chris, myself, everyone at ImpEx were amazed at how tirelessly you start your day early in the morning. David Keir tells us everything. There's nothing you can hide from us, by the way. David Keir tells us your every movement.
That's a shame.
Well, you get up in the morning so you can drive to work, so you can go to the distillery, and you can do, all the things you're known to do, all the wonderful blending that you're doing. And I guess the question is, what's motivating you after 50 years? And I don't think you're for want of money. You could go to a desert island and have cocktails fill your glass all day long and enjoy the beach. What has you distilling and blending and doing all of this?
I think if you ask all of the other people who are on this panel, they will tell you the same thing, that you become affected by your involvement in this industry. This isn't work as people would define work. This is a real joy to be involved, and it's a journey that, particularly if you're in the kind of role that I play, it's a journey that you can pursue for as many years as you want and follow the development of the whiskey. And when we sold the last tranche of distilleries, in my heart I knew there was still some unfinished business. and the opportunity to wake up in the morning with a purpose and still get an involvement and drive something that, frankly, was a very, very nice distillery that, if it hadn't changed ownership, would never have been allowed to express its personality to the world. And that's fun as well. And it's a sense of, this may sound a little bit conceited, and I don't mean it to be, but it's a sense of, there is a sense of pride in taking something that is relatively unknown, in fact, probably fully unknown outside of the blending world, and actually representing the qualities that it has to the world, and doing a whole variety of things in terms of wood management to bring new expressions and indeed totally redefine the personality of what GlenAllachie was. That's fun. You know, that's not, that doesn't give me sleepless nights. That actually makes me wake up early in the morning, get in the car and drive up.
Do you feel as if GlenAllachie gives you the chance to put a lasting thumbprint, if you will, on whiskey? Because I think your point here is a good one. You're able to finally shine onto the world this distillery that no one would have had unless they've tasted it in a blend or had it through an independent bottling.
Yeah,
no one's had GlenAllachie until you. Is that a contribution you wanted to make?
Well, I think it's a contribution that, in reflection, we will be more than proud about and happy to have done. But, you know, I can give you 20 distilleries, 30 distilleries that you could comfortably bring to the market and expose them, and they would not disappoint. We're just lucky that we've had the opportunity to do this. I've never been brave enough, or maybe the timing was never right, to do what Alec and I'm sorry, I'm getting do what this gentleman did as well. You know, starting a distillery from scratch is an incredibly brave venture, and in the early days of that, there will be challenges that I'm sure at night are almost considered to be insurmountable. So I've never actually been confronted with that dilemma. But buying distilleries that had no reputation or had never been exposed to the market was a different kind of challenge. But we had the opportunity to bring mature whiskey to the market quite quickly, which was kind of an easier challenge than starting from anew. And you have to say what both Kilchoman and Ardnamurchan are doing and have achieved. I mean, it's a wonderful milestone to have achieved, and there will be other milestones that will bring great pleasure to them. And David, down in the bottom of the screen here, he's starting out with the journey, and there will be barriers along the way, and you'll either have to climb over them or duck round them, and that's how it is. But it's fun.
I like that. In the end, it's fun. Yeah, we had some people send some questions in to us, like I mentioned before. There's one that came in from John Bourne, and this one is for you, Anthony. He says, Kilchoman's growth has been fun to watch, and I agree with him. I've been watching your growth since 2007. So it has been fun, especially as you bring your fans along via social media. Kilchoman seems to be a brand that will endure for generations to come. And so his question is there a quality or characteristic in today's Kilchoman that you hope will be there in 100 years?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think we're all on the same page there. You're stamping the image and this individual single malt that you're presenting to people around the world. And if you suddenly, 20 years in, decide to change that completely, then you're a fool, especially if it's doing well in the marketplace. Because I think people take up and follow a brand because they like what they're seeing from that brand. And yes, you can innovate, and yes, you can use different cask maturation, and you can talk about all sorts of different wonderful things. But I think it's the DNA of the single malt, and you know, we at Kilchoman have a particular DNA, and we like what we've got. And you know, look, I've got a lot to thank for Jim Swan, who sadly isn't with us any longer, but he set me on the road. As Alex alluded to, we weren't production people. We came into this from a sales and marketing perspective, and we needed people to hold our hands. And Jim Swan did that for me in bucket loads. I mean, he was just a tremendous individual, who then went on to help a lot of new startup distillers around the world, and I have a huge amount of admiration for him. And you know, he clearly told me right from the word go, look, you know, make a consistently good quality character and spirit that you like, and then make sure you look after it in the wood, and wood plays a massive role, and will continue to do so. Although everybody's talking about other weird and wonderful things that are going on at the distillery, it's really the wood that plays the biggest part, and the bourbon and sherry casks that Jim managed to get introductions for us. You know, we'll continue that journey. I think we have to be innovative as a new brand, and we will continue to do that. But Kilchoman will always have, well, as long as I have breath in my body, will continue to have the same style and character as it started out with, because that's what people are enjoying, and you'd be foolish to change that dramatically. And so when we decided to up production, you know, we only had 2 little stills. You know, it would have been easy for me to say, well, we'll just, you know, replace those with larger stills. On we go again. But then that would have changed the character and the style of the spirit. And so we built basically a new distillery. That's what we did. 2 new stills, another mash tun, and 6 more washbacks. And we feel what was key was to maintain the character and style of the spirit that we were producing. And I think it's important for every distillery to have a particular style, and then play around with different cask maturation. I don't think that's ever going to change. You know, that single malt is a pretty simple spirit to produce, and you know, wood plays a massive part in that. I think, you know, Billy's got more experience about wood policy and wood maturation than anybody sitting in this panel today, and he would attest to that, I'm sure, that's what we play around. And at Kilchoman, of course, we've done things differently in full maturation in different woods, and we've enjoyed that. But really, at the end of the day, we know how well it works in bourbon and sherry. We'll continue to fill mainly those, and enjoy the experiments that we're doing, and seeing how we can showcase Kilchoman in different styles and different characteristics.
Just promise me you'll fill some more Sauterne casks, because I'm running dangerously low on this, Anthony.
Was that the full maturation? Was that the full maturation?
The 2016 full maturation.
Yeah, well, that was an absolute bugger to work with. It was all over the place for the first few years, and I didn't think we weren't going to be able to do anything with it, and we thought we'd have to re-rack it and do something else, but it came around in the end. But actually, if I'm going to be honest, you know, Sauterne has been the most difficult of all the releases we've done. That was the most tricky to pull together. But we'll continue to do that, and we're enjoying it. You know, now that tequila and mezcal are becoming so massively popular around the world, you know, we filled a few tequila and mezcal casks, and the mezcal casks have been wonderful to work with. You know, they have that smoky character. And actually, it's not fighting against the Islay peaty character. It's actually come together in quite a wonderful way. So look, we'll continue that, but it's going to be in a small way. We're not going to suddenly wake up one morning and say, God, it's worked in STR casks. We're going to put everything into STR. No. Bourbon and sherry are still going to be the mainstay for Kilchoman.
Beautiful. I'm gonna switch gears yet again, because I'm looking at the 7 of us on the screen. And in the upper right-hand side, I see a red-haired gentleman who's been too quiet for my liking, and then this gentleman right in the center top there, Mr. Filmus. I have a question for you both. You two are responsible for the brands that get put onto the ImpEx portfolio, and I personally know there are a lot of brands that reach out to you and you have your reasons for saying yes, and you have your reasons for saying no. I would love for you to share with everybody your reasons for saying yes or your reasons for saying no when thinking of bringing new brands into the States.
Well, the four gentlemen that are in this panel represent four major whiskey producing regions in Scotland. So that's how we, Chris and I, wanted to see the ImpEx portfolio, by representing Speyside and Highlands and Islay and Lowlands. So the criteria that we have, a lot of criteria for me personally, and Chris will add to this or correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of good whiskeys produced today. People kind of learned how to produce the whiskey in a younger age or longer matured. But my main concern or my main criteria of this is the people who are behind these brands, people that we share our passion and knowledge and philosophy and desire to succeed. So I start with this. This is number one always, and then quality, and then how it fits the portfolio best. But again, this is number one by far. People, human factor, human touch. Christopher?
I would just echo everything Sam said, but then I would also say that I think Sam and I both kind of subscribe to the Tao of Billy Walker, where we want to get forward 40 years from now and look back and realize we retired 50 years prior, right? And the only way you can do that is to make sure the people that you work with, like your supplier partners and whatnot, are just cool people making really good stuff. And if you accomplish that, then it removes a lot of headaches that people would consider to be work, and it makes your work more into a joy, where you want to get up in the morning and get in the car and get to the office to do what you do, right? It's pretty simple. Yeah. So, and everyone here, like, I haven't said nothing tonight because I have nothing to contribute. I'm taking notes, like everybody in the chat. I'm just taking notes and learning.
There's a great question that came in through the comments through YouTube from Reginald Ritter. Excuse me, I got a little whiskey, went down the wrong tube there. And this one's for everyone. What are you doing today when the single malt market is doing well to prepare for the next potential downturn, which hopefully is years and years away? And if everybody doesn't mind, I think I'd like to direct this question first to Billy Walker, who definitely lived through a whiskey loch in the 80s. What are your thoughts there of a potential downturn again, as we've seen this industry go through peaks and troughs?
Look, it's inevitable that the momentum that we're enjoying at the moment will not continue forever. But the only caveat I would say that during my long term in this industry, the kind of demography of people who are buying now, in terms of both countries and continents, is changing all the time. I mean, when, for example, when the USSR broke up, who would have thought that you would, within a year or 2 years, you'd be selling to places like Kazakhstan? And that's the kind of enlightenment that's happening now, that we can't. I had this gut feeling, for example, that South Korea, which was a blended whiskey market, essentially owned by both Diageo and the Chivas brands, that it was going to become a single malt market, but it took much, much longer to become a single malt market. And today, the momentum for single malt in South Korea is amazing now. Here's a, for example, we're going to produce something like 12,000 cases of the next cask strength batch. They would like to take, the importer would like to take 5,000. Now that's extraordinary. You know, the change in perception of what people want in terms of Scotch whisky over the last 5-10 years is amazing. Do I see that throttling back in the short term? No, I don't actually. I think people have got much more disposable income. The people that we engage with, and I'm sure it's the same with Alex and Anthony, that our consumers are really, really informed, challenging, curious, inquisitive consumers. They're looking for something interesting, maybe even different all the time. And they're into single malt in a big way. And I see this growing for at least the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm sure that events will come along and prove me to be totally wrong. But that in my heart tells me this is the journey we're on. And the big danger, I'm not sure I should mention this, the big danger, we know who we are. We certainly know what footprint we're walking in. And we also know that it's very dangerous to tiptoe into the footprint occupied by the likes of the Big Four. The danger might be the Big Four might want to tiptoe into our footprint. That might present a problem or two. But in my mind, I see the future being pretty strong and pretty relatively smooth.
And what about you, David? As a distillery whose spirit only started flowing 2017, 2018, has that ever come into mind as you're building this distillery and looking to grow, this potential contingency plan to lay low and stay alive if things get as rough as they did in the 1983 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I obviously hope that what Billy has just said happens to the letter, because that would be great for the next 5-10 years. And I personally don't see any signs of a slowdown within the part of the market that our brands and the other people in this panel are in. I got quite a good sense that, so my previous role, my customers were 300 distillers, every US, Europe, Asia, and it was always the blend. It was the master distiller or it was the owner, whoever that was dealing with. And they always talked about these cycles, and some said it's 7 years, then loads of people, all of a sudden lots of bulk comes on the market and then it dries up again. But actually all of them pretty much in unison said that they hadn't seen it like this, as in right now, demand where it is, for such a sustained period of time. So that's a positive for me. I'm quite an optimistic person, but I wouldn't be thinking when will this burst? Because actually, in the grand scheme of things, the people in this call we're not the Pernots and Diageos of the world. So I think we've got a good niche there, and I can only see that growing. I think there's certain trends, like I know we've not really talked about it today, but traceability and people buying more premium products and wanting distilleries that are more sustainable in the way they're run and independent, not part of big conglomerates. And all of these, everyone in this call naturally falls into those categories. So long may they all continue. So yeah, I'm quite confident. I mean, certainly that confidence from a Lochlea perspective comes from, we are 100% family owned. Luckily our owner has a few other companies that he's in the renewable energy industry, he's in the retail business, he's got a property company. These are funding us, so we're maybe not. We didn't, for example, we didn't release a gin because we didn't have to release a gin. We didn't sell off a lot of stock early on because we didn't have to do that. So we're in quite a fortunate position, and I'm delighted that we're in that position. Obviously, if things took a crazy turn in 5 years' time, then maybe the strategy changes. But right now, let's hope what Billy says happens.
Joshua, I have a question for the panel, if I can.
Yeah, please.
It goes back to what Billy was saying about the South Korean market exploding unexpectedly. Do you guys find that the palates around the world are kind of globally homogenized, that like one thing strikes everyone's fancy, or do you see different cultures picking on to different cask profiles or different malt profiles within your brands? And are you doing anything to kind of cater to that for any shifts in markets, for like an emerging economy that might become a dominant player as far as purchasing goes over the next 5 to 10 years, and so you're laying down stock now to cater to them then, type thing? Is that something that's on your radar, or is it Whereas everyone's like, sherry cask is the best. I'm buying all the sherry casks I can get, and that's all there is to it.
Go on, Billy.
If you'd asked me that question 30 years ago, I would have said that there may have been differences in people's palates regionally, but I would have to say that in the last 15 years, maybe the last 10 years, I don't see that at all. I think that we don't have to create any particular style to suit a particular region. That doesn't resonate with me at all as I work in the marketplace or indeed in blending.
I was so hoping like one of you, maybe Anthony, would chime in and say the Russians only drink Sauterne cask. That's why it's so tough for me to keep it in stock.
No, I think Billy's absolutely correct. I mean, I think in 15 years ago, you could argue, and maybe to a certain extent now, Asia was more keen on sherry cask maturation, and big sherries were something the Asians enjoyed, and I think to be fair, we took a bit of a while to establish ourselves in Asia because we were maturing mainly in bourbon casks, and maybe it was because new distillery and they were so less likely maybe to try out a new whiskey from Islay. Islay was never a major seller in the Asian markets. Now it's becoming stronger, and Alex was talking about mainland China, and for a company like ourselves that's now been selling single malt since 2009, so 12 years, we've seen a shift in emphasis, and we've certainly, I targeted when I first started Kilchoman and started marketing and selling Kilchoman, we targeted the sort of European mature markets and North America. I know, Sam and I met up in 2010. I think we first met up, and we went with ImpEx in 2010. But Asia wasn't really on our radar particularly. Yes, we were in Japan a little bit and Taiwan, because Taiwan was becoming quite a serious single malt market. But now, we see, Billy was alluding to South Korea. Suddenly we've seen South Korea grow from absolutely nothing, 6-7 years ago, a handful of cases every year, to something that's really quite exciting. It's great to see. And China is similar. We know everybody was talking about China many years ago as the next big thing for single malt. And yes, I think it is beginning to happen. And we've certainly seen it in our small way, how China has now sort of leapt up into our top 5 markets overnight. Not overnight, obviously. We've been working in China since 2010. But over the last 2 or 3 years, Kilchoman has started to get quite a serious player in China. And so, when I look at the markets and where we're going in the next 5 or 10 years, I have nothing but excitement about the journey that Kilchoman can take over the next 5 to 10 years. Not only in the mature markets, because we're a tiny little brand in mature markets, we see great growth in the mature markets. But what's even more exciting is the new markets opening up, and we're getting contacts from continents. South America is becoming quite an interesting market. And I think it's just about, now having established ourselves in a small way over the last 12 years, you see, where you're going, and certainly the mature markets are still taking us forward, in no uncertain terms. But it's great to see all these other emerging markets coming on stream, and we're supplying into small markets. So to answer the question, I think it's even more than 5-10 years. I think 15 to 20 years is where I would very happily think that we have great potential, all the brands here in this panel tonight, for growth around the world, because it's a big place, the world, and single malt is certainly not in every continent and growing fast in every continent, and there's still great potential out there. And so yes, no, I'm very, very excited. 20 years time though, I might be in my bloody wheelchair, but I'll certainly hopefully be around to watch the boys grow the brand around the world.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you, Anthony. And to show everyone, whiskey just brings the world together.
There's actually, while we were talking, there was a great prediction that came in regarding the bust of the whiskey industry, and we'll be happy to know the inimitable Mark Watt is on here, and he says it'll only burst when Billy retires. So The industry is fine, so just keep doing what you're doing, Billy.
Stay alive.
Travis Williams had piggybacked a little bit on Reggie's question here about the bust of the industry, but his question is the opposite. What do you think attributed to the big upswing in the single malt market? Now, I think Anthony, and Billy, your comments kind of touched on it a little bit. All of a sudden, there are countries and new markets that you're able to sell into that you hadn't been able to sell into before. But Alex, David, as especially Alex, I know David, your brand is only just starting to launch, but Alex, as you've seen it starting with the independent side and now with the distillery, what do you think has contributed to this boom in the industry? Is it just the opening of new markets, or is it something else going on?
I think it's a bit of a snowball effect. And if I can start just by picking up on what Billy and Anthony said, I think, we all, as small to medium players in the single malt market, we all have much more control over our destiny than the last bust period, if you like. Back in the 80s, Scotch whisky was still predominantly being made for blending, and once it left your distillery, you had very little control over how successful it was, because it would end up in someone else's blend. And if that blend wasn't, if the world turned against blend, or that blend wasn't doing particularly well, your production suffered as a result. Nowadays, with single malt, we literally have control over it all the way through the process. So I'd just start by saying that. And then in terms of how we've seen the demographics, the growth, if you like, in the category, one of my very early mentors was a man named Hugh Mitcalf, and he arrived. He was poached by Macallan back in mid-70s, I think. Billy, you can correct me here. He came from Glengrand, I think.
Willie Phillips would have been the MD of Macallan then.
Yeah,
who was also a very influential guy.
Exactly. Hugh came in as marketing director, their first ever marketing or marketing manager, even possibly then. And I believe, well, he told me this story, that he was basically told to take Macallan to the world for the first time as its own, single malt. And he could pretty much choose which market he wanted to use as a guinea pig. And he chose Taiwan. And the budget he was given for that year, that first year in Taiwan, for Macallan was £500. And that wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. So yeah. We've seen, and again, touching on Anthony, what Billy and everyone else has said tonight, we've seen the independent bottlers having some influence as well. But really, if you look at it today as a snapshot of what the single malt whiskey drinker is why they are involved, why they are pushing this forward with us, it's partly to do with the fact that we can be in your living room, like tonight or this morning. We can be there at a click of a button. We've got these social media channels, but crucially, it's about how we treat our sort of philosophy, if you like, as well. So we can be very traceable. We don't have to hide behind secret recipes like the blenders quite rightly had to. We can literally tell you which grain of barley went into which cask, from start to finish, just about. And with modern technology, we can also document it much more easily. So we can provide that open book production for the consumer, and the consumer, like consumers of everything that we drink and eat today, they have this hunger for the story and to understand exactly how that product arrived. So I think there's a whole combination of things, but we're just very lucky to be here at the right time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at the clock and I realize we only have about 16 minutes left. And I know, Sam, you said you may have to pop off just 5 minutes early, and I know you had a question for Alex. So Alex, I'm going to ask you a question here, and then David, I have a question for you as well, one that was sent in before this event. So, Alex, this is from Sam. There's a lot of newer distilleries that have been popping up, and they look to release their whiskeys at a much younger age. And Jim Swan has played a great part into this, right? And Anthony can, of course, attest to this, right? Produce a spirit that you can release at a young age, and it's delicious, complex, balanced, etc. Ardnamurchan seemed to wait a bit longer than some of the others that would release their whiskeys at 3 years, 4 years of age, etc. So what was your motivation to wait a bit longer to release your whiskey?
It was only a little bit. Yeah, it was only a little bit longer, maybe an extra year or two. No, I think I said this at the beginning, and you very, very kindly mentioned the Canadian image of a hockey stick. But a lot of that came down to the fact that we had distribution in place, so there was demand,
Yeah.
and for the last, or whatever it's been, 6 or 7 years, every time we've been out with Adelphi at shows, tastings, whatever, we've been promoting Ardnamurchan, even though there wasn't actually a liquid to promote. So there was knowledge out there. There was hunger, hopefully, thirst. So with that in mind, I was very, very aware that if we released too early, we could potentially shoot ourselves in the foot, and we would end up with a spike in the sort of early surge you get for any new product that comes to market, and then we wouldn't be able to follow it up with anything else for another 6 months or a year. So we made sure that we had that consistency of stock, and everything that we've produced as whiskey in bottle has been minimum 5 years old, and that's allowed us to have that volume. And it's not a huge volume, but it's enough. It won't be until we get to really about 2019 in terms of a 5-year-old, so 2024, that we can really, be quite generous with our allocation. Yeah. But it certainly helped just waiting that wee bit longer.
The small batch that you sent in, along with the single cask that came with it, it came to the States and it went on the store shelves as quickly as it came in, and then we followed up with another batch, and there's another single cask coming through. What are your plans? And this isn't just for the US, but in general, what are your plans for the future? Are you looking to create an established core range, or stick with a batch system that's then complemented by single casks? What's your 5-year plan, if you will?
So, I mean, every single malt technically is a batch. We just chose to kind of
That's true.
Like that, a little bit stronger. And I think one of the reasons we did that was that, in your first year of release, what you want to produce, what you want to put in bottle, but you've also got to slightly take feedback as well. And over that year, so we've done this year, we've done 6 releases now, 6 batches, each one growing slightly. And we've been trying to get consistency. So we've been from batch number 1 last year, we've been taking that and evolving it. And now pretty much since March, so whatever that was, batch 3 or 4 this year, through to the one we've just done a couple of weeks ago, we're very happy that we've reached a nice level of consistency. So going forward next year, mainly because of that reason, but also, to be honest, and I'll be very commercial about this, the way Brexit has hampered all of us in this room in terms of packaging delays and everything else, you've got to be slightly more aware of if you take a carton, for example, if you make it very limited in its existence, so if it's a batch and then it's thrown away or used, you've got to wait much longer to get another one now. So we're just trying to make everything a little bit more consistent and generic. And now that we're comfortable, we have a very nice core range. So the small batch, as you call it, will still be a batch release, but it will be very less obvious on the bottle and box.
Got it.
In terms of the consistency. So that's the main thing. But on the back of that as well, it also allows us to springboard into more limited releases. And we've got some very nice different casks coming on and other options that we've been considering. So I think what you'll see from early next year is more volume in the limited release side as well as the core release.
Perfect. Cheers. David, there was a question that came in from Peter Willems for you, or was it? Here we go. This question says, the Lochlea website says you want to create a whiskey for drinking, and that it appears in a cocktail cabinet. Is there a specific direction Lochlea wants to go where it focuses more on younger core expression whiskeys that could be used in cocktails rather than, say, GlenAllachie that has many single cask expressions? So I guess in the end, what is the aim for the Lochlea spirit?
Yeah, well, good question. So there's I can answer it in two ways. So the first release, I think, not from just from Lochlea, but from any new the inaugural release is I'm sort of treating as a separate thing, to be honest. It's great that we can bring out our first whiskey, but I don't think there's any way of limiting that from appearing on a secondary market somewhere, or people sitting on the bottle for. I mean, if they're going to sit on it, open it at some point, ideally. But I think that's a case in itself. On the actual core expression that we plan to bring out next year, we're not specifically aiming towards a sort of cocktail type. I mean, I personally prefer my whiskey on its own. I'm never going to tell someone that's made the effort and bought a bottle of Lochlea, this is how you should drink it in any way. Neat, ice, water, cocktail, whatever please just enjoy it. We're probably, with the core expression, pretty open with if people want to drink it in whenever they prefer. Alongside that core expression, we do plan to release some more limited, kind of smaller batches, almost not naming seasons, but a kind of 1 1/4 type thing, where that will be a limited version. It'll be a different cask type, and it will be essentially showcasing the Lochlea spirit in a different way. So I've been talking to John about this a lot in the past few days, and we're pretty set on what we're gonna go with there. So people, over the next few years, until we get to, for example, an age statement whiskey, we will have some different. There'll be an ongoing core, which will be the one that we have most of, and then there will be some more limited edition small batch releases, but not too many.
That's beautiful. Actually, you talking about this reminds me of Anthony, what you did with Kilchoman in 2010, 2011 with your quarterly or seasonal releases. How do you say that did for you as you were growing Kilchoman as a single malt brand?
I think when we first launched, we just did these limited releases, seasonal limited releases. But the feedback, and I think, as anyone knows, you have to listen to your consumers and take stock of that and decide the way forward. But we soon realized that actually, we needed a core expression that was always sitting on the shelf and always available to those who wanted to stock Kilchoman. So that's when we launched Mackenzie Bay, because we felt that the time was right after 3 years of doing small limited releases, that we needed something that was always going to be available. And that's when Mackenzie Bay was launched in 2012, and then 2014 we followed up with another core product. So we have these two core products, very different in style and character, mainly bourbon cask matured from Mackenzie Bay, and Saneg, which is predominantly Oloroso sherry cask matured. And we felt that was the right time to do that. I think we had ambitions to grow a brand, and everybody in this room knows that well, apart from Billy, who can launch a 10 and a 12 and a 15-year-old almost from day one, we couldn't do that. So and we don't have age statements, and that's a debate and topic that everyone will talk about forever and a day, about whether you should or shouldn't. And at the moment, that's open for debate. We don't have any set plan for age statement whiskies at the moment, but the core expressions will remain. I think the problem we have is that we didn't produce enough liquid from day one, but that was very clear. I took the decision that let's just put our toe in the water and see what happens. So don't produce 500,000 litres from day one. You know, we were the first new distillery since Aaron. I wasn't prepared to just sort of produce. It's very costly to produce loads of spirit every day. So, you know, but now looking in hindsight, I would say, Christ, we should have produced 500,000 litres. But that's all very good to have hindsight on your side. But you know, and then we still have our limited releases. But like the others, you know, single cask, us launching single cask is a massive part of what we do at Kilchoman. And as an independent bottler in my previous life, you know, we do all that in-house, and it's proved incredibly popular, the single cask that we do for our distributors around the world, and we will continue to do that. But having core range allows us to build a little bit of volume at a more competitive end of the market. And you know, we set our heights pretty, our goal pretty high in terms of where we wanted to go. And eventually you have to move away from limited releases and have core products that your distributors can grab hold of and take out to their customers and build the brand on the back of those volumes at competitive prices. And we'll continue that. And we'll see where we go. I mean, Christ, it's quite interesting. Next week, we'll have some 16-year-old casks in our distillery. Alex, you've got to wait a little bit longer. But it's great that we've got some casks in the warehouse and now got considerable age. And it's a fantastic job I have going into the warehouse and checking on all these casks. And it's, you know, some of these casks are showing beautifully. So we're looking forward to launching some older releases of Kilchoman in the near future.
That's great. So with just 4 minutes left, and actually, Anthony, you pretty much answered what I thought was a good sort of closing question for everybody. And this came in from Fred Davids. So how do you prioritize how much effort your whiskey gets, whether it's experimental or, you know, unusual releases versus your core range? So in your production, how do you do that? Is there an 80-20 ratio that you have to consider when producing, when filling casks, etc.? Maybe Alex, we'll hand that off to you. How do you prioritize experimental versus core?
If I'm absolutely honest, I think we're probably too young to give you a good view on that yet. But what I would say is that we have a quarterly team blending session, if you can call it that. I like to involve as many people within the team as possible when it comes to making the whiskey. And so pretty much to date, the quarterly session has involved putting another batch of Ardnamurchan core release together. And within that session, because we're going through 70, 80, 90 samples at a time, we are picking out potential single casks when we find them. So they're not going into the standard if they're standing out, you know. So that's kind of how it's been working to date. We're always in the warehouses looking at stuff, seeing how it's coming on. So we'll find things that way as well. But going through next year, and in fact, the next blending session, which is happening next month, is going to be on a special limited edition only. So that will be the first time that we've actually had a dedicated session for one of our non-core releases. So yeah, maybe we're growing up. I don't know.
How about you, Billy? You know, you've put in a lot of effort into your various cask finishes, the Rye, the Gratamaco, Rioja, etc. That doesn't seem to be slowing down. How do you balance these special unusual releases while maintaining your core?
Well, we see them as running in parallel with the core, and they're almost semi-core. But you know, you have to plan 3-4 years ahead with a lot of these wine style casks. And one area we're looking at the moment, and we've tested the water with some releases, is we're looking at various oak genuses and various oak provenance. We're looking at Russian, Bulgarian, Czech, French, Spanish. We're looking at different genuses of American oak, Chinkopin, Gariana. And we've done a lot of homework in this, and a lot of the boilerplate is already in place for releases that will come to the market maybe in 12 months, 18 months, or 2 years. So we although although we see the core range, the GlenAllachie core range, as being unquestionably influenced by the various sherry casks that we're using, in parallel, we're running a lot of derivatives that involve wine casks and fortified wines and various virgin oak casks. And very excited, I have to say, very, very excited about how these virgin oak casks of the different provenances are developing.
Brilliant. Yeah, these I've heard about the Chinquapin. I, of course, haven't tasted it yet, but it reminds me a little bit of what GlenMorrangie was doing in the earlier 2000s when, you know, Dr. Bill was doing truffle oak and Chinquapin and some of these other oaks, really highlighting what different virgin oak can be. So this is, and that seemed to be done on a much smaller scale than what you're looking to be doing now.
Well, you know, we would look at a minimum of 1,000 cases. And one of the ones that we're looking at and really very carefully and delighted with is Scottish virgin oak. Very difficult to work with, difficult to source, very expensive. But we've got some casks that have been in for about 18 months, 2 years now, and we are absolutely chuffed by how they're developing. So, you know, there's a lot of interest. I mean, Anthony alluded to it earlier. The management of wood, and if you're brave enough to invest a lot of money in wood, you will not be disappointed. It plays such a pivotal and important role in what is going to happen in this industry. And if you don't do it, you'll get left behind.
Yeah. Billy,
right.
sorry, Joshua, can I just mention
yeah, please.
That, the storm that went through Scotland last week, what was it called, Arwen or something?
Yeah.
The first name storm. Surely you've got much more opportunity for Scottish virgin oak now that that's going to destroy most of the forestry.
Alec, you're being cruel, Alec.
So we're a little over, but I would like to just put this final question on to David, as you are, and you touched on it a little bit in your in your previous answer, but as you are looking to launch your product next year, how do you plan on prioritizing what will become core and your experiments? And then just to change the question up a little bit, do you see the potential of your experiments becoming your core?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I sat down with John on Monday this week and went through this exact question and looked at our inventory plan for the next 15 years. And we know already what that core expression will look like in terms of cask makeup. So we have enough of that to meet our plan. Because we are so young, we've got 15 different cask types maturing in the warehouse, 2 different spirit styles. There's a lot of options there. So trying to, I mean, some of those are they've only been in cask for a year or for 18 months. So it's difficult to say that will become, you know, whatever in 10 years time. We need to see how our spirit actually interacts with that wood type before we decide. But we've got loads of plans. I think once we get to sort of, you know, the Lochlea 10 is available, then clearly we need to make sure we leave enough behind in the warehouse to get there. So it will change. I mean, I don't think there's no doubt if we grow faster than we've planned, then we'll just need to move some things around or fill some more of what we thought we had enough of, I'm sure. But with all the different wood types that we're working with, I agree with, I know all the guys have said it, but and there's a debate over what percentage flavour comes from cask, but it's the majority, there's no doubt about that. And although we want to make a really high quality premium spirit, the wood and the fact that we source direct with our bourbons, with our sherries, with all the other wine, rum, port, we get them from the producer, not through a broker or cooperage. So there's making sure they're fresh and going to have as much influence as possible. Not overpowering what Lochlea is as a new make, but We want to make sure that we're not putting any liquid into bad wood at all.
Perfect. Gentlemen, that's our time. Thank you all so much. I understand this is a commitment to stay up or set your alarm clocks and brew that tea and pour that Loch Gorm and et cetera, or get ready for a ride at 5 a.m, Mr. Walker. It's been a pleasure, and I just want to thank you all for joining for the conversation. Just really quickly to the viewers, please join us on December 8th, where we will be highlighting World Whiskey or World Single Malt. And then on December 15th, we'll be focusing on independent bottlers, and we'll actually have Alex Bruce coming back on to discuss independent bottling. Hopefully. Is it shaking?
There'll be one
okay.
of us. You'll have one of us.
Okay.
Or maybe two.
So there you go. So you may be here in spirit, at least. I hope everybody enjoyed this evening. The questions that came in were wonderful. The answers were great, and the conversation was too. Go to sleep, get a good rest, make some delicious whiskey. We'll sell it. I'll drink it. I'll also sell some too, but I'll drink it as well. Have a good night, all.
Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.